Well, welcome everyone. It's that time again for Bear Analytics Weekly Event Insight Series, as we do our webinar every Wednesday at noon. And so we're welcoming you all once again, so we appreciate you joining us. And so my name is Eric Misick, and we're joined by Joe Colangelo, who's going to lead today's discussion. And we have a special guest, Howard Givner from the Event Leadership Institute. He's going to talk to us about the future of event education. So talking about how to use education to develop new skills and also to get the talent to help some of the voids currently that we're facing in the marketplace. So we're looking forward to that discussion. And as always, if you have any questions at all during today's discussion, don't be shy. Put those in the question box or in the chat box there in that side panel and GoToMeeting. We'll get those throughout today's discussion. So pepper us with questions, pepper Howard with questions, and we'll make sure we get those burning questions answered here quickly. So with that, we'll turn it over to Joe, who will lead today's discussion.
Thanks, Eric. And I think we have the Howard guarantee that he said he's going to answer every question, and it's going to be a great answer. So that we got the Howard guarantee on that. So please put your questions in the chat. Howard, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We got a ton to talk about, but let's get things kicked off. Talk to us a little bit about yourself and ELI. What does the audience need to know?
Sure, thanks for having me, Joe. So my background is I used to run and own an event agency for a number of years. And after selling it, I stayed on for a couple of years for transition. And then I wanted to work on building out the training resource that I didn't have available for my team. And that was basically how the Event Leadership Institute came about. I was known for rigorous training of new hires. You know, I got tired of it taking 4 months to get a new hire up to speed. I also got tired of walking around my office and hearing 4 different people describe what we do in 4 different ways. And so at the time I wrote a 100-something page training manual on what we do, frequently asked questions and responses, selling points, in addition to the different procedures and things like that. And I even had a quiz at the end, and you couldn't get on the phone with a client until you passed that test. And I know I was viewed as being anal, but you know what? It worked. So when I left, I created ELI at the time with thinking about how event professionals need to get access to training and content. And so we started with a Netflix-style on-demand video library, and that's a subscription model. And with the content that we have is typically anywhere from like 20 to 60 minutes long in that section. Everything is designed to be unbundled for microlearning. So when we design everything, it's designed from the ground up to be chaptered, and those chapters will stand alone for on their own as snackable bites. And so that's still there. That's working really well. We've got about 180 some odd videos across all different disciplines in sales, creative, technical production, strategy, what have you. Then we started having people asking for more structure. And the difference is somebody who has a discipline to get on an exercise bike in their house versus somebody who wants to go to an exercise class or a spin class. So we created those spin classes, which became certificate courses. And those, we've got about a dozen of those. They tend to follow an instructor-led syllabus. They run several weeks. When they're done, the participant can take an online exam. If they pass that exam, they earn a clickable digital credential that certifies what they learned. And those have been sort of the 2 prongs of our business. But at the end of the day, our mission has been to help event professionals take their events, take their businesses, their teams, their careers to the next level. And implicit in that is always helping them prove the value of their events and prove the value of what they do as an employee or as an agency or as a team.
So let's get into that directly, because in today's environment, you can't go a day without seeing an email headline or an article headline about more folks have left the events industry than are coming in. People are moving teams. I can tell you personally, my LinkedIn is a consortium of folks moving across different companies. Certainly folks have left the industry you know, a kind of a retirement, moved on from their career capacity. How do you guys sit at the intersection of that, or what are you doing to help support event organizers, experienced designers, currently skilled people in the marketplace to do what you just said, further their career, or be able to justify, you know, kind of their ROI?
Yes, that's a good question. So a big part of that is having our finger on the pulse of the industry and what's going on, and not just being reactive, but being proactive. As an example, in March of 2020, when a good chunk of the meetings and events industry was still kumbaya, everything's going to be fine, you know, don't worry, keep booking business, we were pretty, you know, solidly behind the evidence that this was going to be a tsunami. And the only way the industry could survive within the next, we didn't know how long, but we knew it was going to be a little while, was virtual events. And I had experience with virtual events from 10 years earlier. I remember doing a presentation at an IAEE conference on virtual events. And at the time, there were only two players. One was Unisphere, and they were acquired by somebody. The other was Inexpo, which has since become Intrado, which has now been rebranded as Notified. And I remember, you know, going through the mechanics of it and the functionality of it, and people are like, oh, that sounds really cool. But, you know, when I can have a virtual beer with my client, I'll come to, you know, look at this. And, you know, sure enough, it came. And I remember saying at the time, this is coming whether we like it or not. And if we embrace it as planners, it'll come through us. If not, it's going to come through IT or comms or some other way. And so, you know, it was there. We pivoted really quickly. Pivot is not really the right word because we were always doing courses, but we fast-tracked development of a 6-week certification course on virtual event and meeting management. And we had it live for registration on April 14th. We launched on Global Meetings.
This is 2020, April 14th, 2020, just in case we had a couple of folks just jump in. Yeah.
Right. And I was navigating this. Some people know I was, you know, battling brain cancer at the time, and I was in and out of the hospital. I'm like, this has to happen. We got to make this done, and we got to move this fast because the industry is really scrambling. And, you know, thankfully, we probably had about 4,000 people go through that. It was the only course of its time. It's still the best and the most detailed course, and we've updated it twice already. But there was nothing else there. And, you know, there have been since other opportunities for training in this space, but they came at a minimum a year later. And so we've always sort of looked to be ahead of the curve. For example, over that summer, 2020, in August, we started seeing, you know, things inching back to in-person. Now, there were a lot of setbacks, but it started looking like that might happen. So we developed a pandemic meeting and event design course that was, how do you deal with risk management? How do you deal with ventilation? What's the go, no-go decision-making process? How do you socially distance? How do you do testing? How do you do, you know, later on when vaccines are available, what are the vaccine protocols? And in January that year, the following year in 2021, we had a lot of folks saying, okay, well, my strategists know about all this, but what about the small army of staff that we bring on site? So we created a micro course for on-site pandemic protocol. So this is not to sort of brag and mention our courses, but just you had asked about how we stay abreast of what's going on. And we do a lot of listening. We follow a lot of trends, not just in the industry, but outside the industry. We do these periodic state of the industry webinars that, you know, have a couple thousand people participate, and we digest, curate, and intuit what's happening. We take our best guess as to, okay, here's what's happening with, you know, the trend to remote work. What does this mean? Certain events are going to get hit hard, but there are big opportunities right now. What's going on with the metaverse? How does that impact everybody? And so the goal is to continually provide our best guess of insight, prediction, and helping the planner and supplier side of the industry be armed with the resources and the insights that they need to understand what's going on and what's coming and be able to react to that in real time.
So just to piggyback on one thing that you just said that I found remarkably kind of interesting is you were kind of ticking through like some of the health protocol things. We developed a course for this, we developed a module for that. At the time, and still maybe today, I feel like that's an area where there are folks who are still trying to figure out what a best practice kind of could be. And so from a discovery standpoint, I think you mentioned there's 180 different courses. We're not talking about like 10 million, courses where folks have to sort through. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're only focused on the meat and potatoes, right? Like these are the things that are hard hitting at the time and they're practical. Like this is timely, practical, 100% necessary, kind of trainings. And then how do you see maybe let me ask this, does it come down through an organization? So you're getting somebody like a CXO or a CXO going, hey, this is what we need to do? Or are there folks that are just mobilizing themselves from maybe the middle of an org or a team?
Yeah. So just to clarify that, the content that we have is not just current, what do you need to do right this second. It's more about everything that's going on that you need to do your job. So we've got a ton of stuff that is evergreen, and that's probably the majority of what we have. So aspect ratios for visual display and slides, working with volunteers if you have volunteers at your event, determining the tax deductibility of an auction item if you have a fundraiser, managing transportation, negotiating with venues. There's a ton of stuff that is evergreen and continually updated, but is not in any way COVID related. Where I think we've done a really good job is being faster than anybody in coming and addressing what's coming and where the changes are and what those impacts might have on our industry. And we try to get ahead of those things. So I'll give you an example of another thing that has nothing to do with COVID, but I think creates additional uncertainty right now is the idea of this, I call it the boycott dilemma. And I've been writing about this for about 8 or 9 years now. And the concept is you're an organization, you've got an event planned in a city, right? In Nashville, let's say. Nashville is a very progressive, urban, vibrant city. And you've got a citywide convention there or a conference there. And the state legislature of Tennessee passes a law that says therapists and psychiatrists can refuse treating patients if they disagree with their religious beliefs. This actually happened a number of years ago, right? So they passed this thing. It's on the same vein of the Indiana religious freedom law, where the baker didn't have to serve the lesbian couple, make a wedding cake for them.
Yeah, I remember seeing that in the news, yeah.
Yeah, so, the Indiana thing happens, huge backlash, a lot of events pulled out of Indiana. The Tennessee thing actually happened, didn't get as much coverage, but there was actually, I think it was the American Psychiatry Association had a citywide event scheduled there, and they moved that at a cost of $1 million, I think it was to Denver. That's coming more and more. So that was a number of years ago, but even just last year, you saw Major League Baseball pull the All-Star game out of Atlanta when Georgia passed a restrictive voting law. And I don't want to get into the debates of whether the law was restrictive or not. I think it probably was. But what happens is you have a lot of things that are happening, and a lot of it is driven by local politicians, often on the right side of the spectrum, but in order to curry favor with their base, they pass these things that are a little bit more extreme, certainly for the urban centers where most of the events take place. And so, how do you deal with that? So we've had several sessions on that. We even had a dedicated one in our Business Design and Strategy Summit last June. It was, how do you deal with, as a planner, how do you prepare for these things that might happen? We saw a lot of this happen with the Roe versus Wade. Now you have a number of organizations that are saying, well, we might not go to those states where that have those things. Now, a lot of that is talk that may not actually filter down. But the people in charge of planning these events, they now need to be liaising with public policy teams in their organizations. And you don't want them to be at the tail end of this. They don't want to be like, oh my God, we were just told we have to move this 5,000 person, 9 hotel citywide thing on 3 months notice, which is kind of what happened with the All-Star game. We want them to be empowered to understand the dynamics of this, give them tools so they can get an early read on what things might be coming, and have a seat at the table when those discussions are talked about. We want planners to be able to be responsive and proactive with what's going on so that they are treated as a trusted advisor when these key decisions are made. I mean, probably the most, I'll give one more example.
Go ahead.
Probably the most common question that we've been getting over the last year and a half, and this causes a lot of anxiety for planners and a lot of uncertainty, is should we be in person? Should we be virtual? Should we be hybrid? If we're hybrid, what does that look like? When do we make a decision on in person? If we're in person, how much do we guarantee? How many people can we guarantee? Do we go by the 2019 numbers? Do we go by, what we had for virtual? We don't really know. And there's this sense of like, hey, you know what? For years, I used to be able to take the XYZ event binder off the shelf, open it up, change the dates, change the city, give a new theme, have new speakers, but it was the same play. Everybody ran the same play. And that created comfort for a lot of people. But you know what else it did? The more automatic it was, the more robotic that process was, the less value the senior stakeholders placed on those roles. They looked at it as formulaic and they thought, how hard can it be? My admin can, I'm obviously dramatizing this, but as you have this uncertainty of what do we do? Do we charge for hybrid? Do we even need the remote feed for the audience? Does it look the same? How do we make this work? These are fluid decisions that the industry is still working through. There's not a right and wrong answer for it, but there are processes that you can think about this as a framework with which you can look at this. That's something that was the genesis of our the course we launched last fall, Advanced Event Design and Strategy, which is a lot of that. And that uncertainty is a big cause of stress in our industry. And I don't think it's going away. It's just going to evolve and be a little bit different. And we've always had it. It's just been really, really pronounced right now.
Okay, so there's a couple, I'm taking notes here because there's a couple of things I want to unpack in what you just said. And so, in kind of early on, so you're talking about, we want to, I'm going to paraphrase and you tell me if I'm off here. But, essentially we want to skill people up in an age of uncertainty, right? Different uncertainty, so like almost uncertain uncertainty to a certain extent. And it helps them to some extent reduce their risk, a little bit of see around corners, you help with that. But if I'm on this right now and I'm not yet one of the thousands and thousands of people that have kind of walked through your product offering, your content, and any one of these subject areas, what do I look like today and what do I look like when I'm done? Or, I've gone through and gotten a number of these certifications. As you've talked to those folks, how do they kind of view their role? Some people might say, what are now their new kind of superpowers? So I think everyone is trying to reduce the uncertainty. Uncertainty is directly tied to stress. There's a lot of discussion out there, on social, and at least in my LinkedIn feed, about how event planners are as highly stressed as air traffic control folks, right? Because you can only get the event right once. So I'll stop with that and love to hear your thoughts on that, Howard.
Yeah, I read that about the air traffic controllers. I think some of that you got to take with a grain of salt. I mean, if an event goes badly, planes aren't crashing into the ground. So, keeping it in perspective, I think what's been what I would say one of the big themes that we try to focus on is empowering planners and suppliers as well to be viewed as trusted advisors to their clients and their stakeholders and their bosses. And that's just a different mentality and a different skill set than executing on the events. We are always going to need people to produce events. We're going to need people who are really good at producing complicated events, who are good creating really detailed run of shows, creating really interesting graphics and displays and automations and engagement and interactions and all those things. But at the end of the day, what I think the big opportunity is for a lot of professionals is to be able to have a seat at that table and not just take orders, not just say, okay, you want to do an event? Great. How many people? What's the date? What's the budget? Okay, it's almost like you're taking an order at a restaurant, right? And the difference between an order taker and a trusted advisor, using the restaurant analogy, the restaurant waiter who's the order taker is just going to listen to what you say, and then bring the food out. And it might turn out that things that you ordered, somebody might order a side of fries, but the fries come with maybe their dish, and the waiter didn't say anything, or the waiter might say, I think you might need a little bit more food, these dishes are a little small, or what have you. So they're providing some guidance in interpreting what there is, as opposed to giving you exactly what you want. And I think that being a trusted advisor means having the knowledge and confidence to say to a stakeholder, I understand what you want to accomplish with this event, and there's a whole skill set in helping those clients define those goals and figure out how to measure those goals. But assuming you get there, being able to say, I know you budgeted $500,000 for this event, which feels like a nice round number based on absolutely nothing. It could be more than enough. It might be not nearly enough. So the trusted advisor should be able to come back to them and say, for what you want to do with this audience persona, it's not enough money. You're going to spend the money, you're not going to get what you want. Here's an idea where you can spend $700,000, and I think we can move the needle dramatically. And the other part of that is being able to understand how the stakeholder evaluates success. So if you're planning an event for clients and prospects, and I think you and I talked about this the other day, if you know that a typical prospect is worth X in the CRM of that company, right? And they've identified that target could generate X number of dollars of business. Then thinking about what that budget is per prospect is a very different way of presenting it to the stakeholder. Taking a step further, if an event involves hosted buyer meetings or curated one-on-one meetings for potential deals, they may know if we close a deal, it's worth $1 million. So what are we spending in our budget per number of meetings that we have? And for a planner, just to simply be able to engage in that dialogue and show that they get it, then it's less about, oh, I saved us, $50,000, right? So taking that same $500,000 budget, and the planner's excited. You told me $500,000. Look what I did. I squeezed these guys, and now I got the event for $450,000. If that event is designed to generate leads and cultivate business, and it doesn't, who cares, right? That event's going to get canceled despite your budget-saving heroics. And so where we try to guide a lot of people in our industry, and regardless of the content or the courses that we're providing, most of it flows through that lens, is how do you use this information to empower those people to have their value, to be really valued, and be true strategic consultants to their clients beyond just order takers and executors.
So that's a really fascinating point at the end there that you walk through that example with the budget, because I feel like over the last 2 years, obviously due to the pandemic, the budget cutting was a super useful skill set, right? That was like almost your most, especially in 2020, that was like your most necessary skill set, and how to move revenue to the following year and dealing with all of these contracts. But I think what I'm hearing is you're saying we're ready to roll over, and we're ready to turn this on its head, and it needs to be more of an ROI focused mentality. So your I may be 450, it may be 500, or it might be 700,000. But if you're not focused on the R, that return in the return on investment, the I doesn't matter, because 0 divided by anything is still 0, and that event's going to 0 is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the way I think of events, and this is with virtual also, is it's a giant brainwashing chamber. Right? I mean, think about other vehicles for communicating and marketing, whether it's an email, social media, something on your website, maybe it's a direct mail or print piece or who knows what, or a podcast. We don't know whether somebody's actually listening or watching that. And if they are, we don't know what's in their mind. We don't know how distracted they are. We don't know how effective it is. Now, it reaches a lot of people, and it's less expensive per person it reaches than an event. However, if you have 500 people at an event, let's take the in-person event as an example first, the organizer controls everything. They control the destination, the building, What does it look like? How are we going to set it up? How are people going to walk through it? What messaging are we going to hit them with? At what points? What food are we going to serve? What speeches are going to be given? What interactive engagements are going to be on site? What materials are they going to get? How are they going to see us, our brand, and our product? And when people leave, we have the goal is for them to do something specific, take an action, have maybe a different version of the brand or reinforce an existing version of the brand, be more loyal to the brand, whatever it is. They come in and we have them for several hours. I mean, it's really like a marketer's dream. And the problem with live event spend was always very expensive, very, very high touch. But when you look at social media, being able to amplify that, if I have a $500,000 budget and it's 1,000 people, I'm spending $500 per person, right? Which is a lot. But let's say those people can now post what they've done at the event on social media. Maybe that 1,000 people becomes 10,000 people that are reached. Now that same $500,000 budget is only $50 per person that we're reaching. And so the concept is, we've got this glorious opportunity where everybody's there and we can talk to them in a room. It's what all the sales people are always dying for. Get me in a room with the prospect. Well, we got hundreds of them in this room and we own this room, right? Even if it's an exhibit booth, you own that area and you can control what people experience in that area. How are you going to use that to do something, to change their mind, to get them from here to here in the funnel, to get them to place an order, to get them to be more amenable to adding different modules onto whatever product it is that they currently buy from you. And I think that's really when we talk about ROI, you're exactly right. Everybody knows what the I is. We know what we're investing. And I would argue that maybe they don't even fully know that because they may not count the time that it takes for all the internal attendees to participate. But we don't qualify.
Yeah, there's very little consideration for staff time and overhead and all that. It's more like what's in the Excel budget sheet, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I understand you got to start somewhere, right? And so, there are definitely questions that you can ask to help people qualify what their goals are. And another good way is, what would happen if we didn't do this event? What would we lose? And what happened during COVID was everybody got to see what happens when you don't do that event. Now, virtual stepped in and was a backstop for a lot of that, but a lot of event organizers now saw what they missed when they didn't do that in-person event. And for some of them, they didn't miss a lot, and they're not coming back, or they're going to need a different value proposition to come back. For a lot of others, they missed it a boatload, and the events that they found value in, those events might be able to charge more money, or they might be able to do additional events or have additional opportunities to upsell. So, we literally took everything away for, the better part of 18 months to almost 2 years. And everybody got to see what life was like with no events, with no in-person events or very few in-person events. And so, there were people talk about virtual events not being as engaging, right? There were a lot of shitty in-person events. There were a lot of events in person where people would fall asleep in the meeting rooms. There were a lot of ho-hum boring events. And 2019, which was the peak of a boom market for our industry, a lot of people that attended events as attendees or exhibitors or sponsors didn't feel the love. They weren't loving what they were getting out of it, but they just felt business was good. It's an annual event, we'll come back. And that safety net is gone. Now they've realized that they don't necessarily need to come back. There are a lot of organizations that now maybe go to big events we had one of the event organizers from Intel was on our Innovation and Engagement Summit in April, and they shared some really cool stuff they did around the Consumer Electronics Show, but they didn't have a presence in the Consumer Electronics Show. They had a massive facility in the Venetian in the lobby, which had ridiculously cool stuff, very interactive, arty, sports, and high tech. But they chose to create their own event because whatever they've been doing at the Consumer Electronics Show didn't give as good of an ROI as this event was. So I think everybody's taking a fresh look at all of this, and the planner who can understand the analytics behind all their events and be able to understand how well or not well a given event advances their goal, that's a very valuable person to have at the table. And a lot of what we're doing is trying to give them the tools, the resources, and the mindset to be able to grow into those roles.
And this is fascinating stuff, Howard. Unfortunately, we're at the half hour. I want to say big thanks. If anyone here is interested in getting a hold of you, learning more about Event Leadership Institute, how do they do it?
Well, they just reach out to me. I'm at howard@eventleadershipinstitute.com. You can just go to the website, eventleadershipinstitute.com. On social, we're at Event Leaders. And I want to give just a quick plug. I want to thank you, Joe, Joe is going to be teaching our data and analytics course, which he's been working on for, I don't know, the past few months. We're going to be launching that pretty soon. I think it's going to go live in August. And he's done a great job of helping to translate a lot of the stuff I've just been talking about into digestible, usable information. So thanks for having me on the show, but also thank you for participating in helping to elevate the knowledge of the industry.
Well, I mean, you're not a passionate guy at all, so it was really hard to get behind. I mean, the first thing that I noticed about, I want to appreciate your sentiments, Howard, but the first thing that I noticed about Howard is you heard him with like going all the way back to the beginning of today's discussion with that 100-page manual, because this is the way to do it and this is the right way to do it. My impression on Howard is he does that with everything. And so it was really easy to align with ELI on that. And we're excited for that course to come out. So thanks again, all those who joined us. Eric, I don't think we have any questions, but correct me if I'm wrong. I know you're there lurking in the background, and we'll be back. I think our next one's actually on a Monday in July 29th. We'll be back. A rare Monday appearance for the Bears.
Fantastic. Well, we'll look forward to that. Yeah, no questions, but we did have one comment. Someone said, amazing and informative presentation. So kudos to you guys. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Kudos to you, Howard. Thanks.
All right.
Awesome. We'll see everybody soon.
Guys.
Take care, all.
Bye-bye.